I need an American to adopt me for approximately 3 days. I've already got my itinerary planned.
America, what have you done to me? You have completely changed my perception of the world.
I just want a little be in the spot. It will make sense eventually.
There is a moment that keeps repeating itself in the stories of European women who have built a life in America. A small, almost invisible moment, easy to miss if you're not looking for it. It happens at a bank counter, in a hospital waiting room, at a folding table where a business license gets signed. It is the moment a woman realizes that no one is waiting for a second signature. No husband's name required, no permission implied, just her own name standing there, entirely sufficient. Back home, so much of a woman's life had been quietly co-signed by someone else, or by something else. A system built long before she was born, still leaving its fingerprints on the present. A mortgage that once needed a husband's approval, even after the laws changed. A pregnancy treated as a private matter, something to manage quietly rather than something a whole community shows up for. A business idea that has to survive months of paperwork before it is even allowed to exist. None of it announced itself as unfair. It simply sat there, in the background, shaping what felt possible and what didn't. And then she stood in a different country, and none of that architecture was there to hold her up or hold her back. What replaces it is not applause, and it is not charity either. It is something plainer, and in some ways more radical. A system that assumes a woman can carry her own weight, starting with the simplest, oldest proof of that, her own credit in her own name. For most of modern history, a woman's financial identity in much of Europe did not belong entirely to her. In the United Kingdom, a woman could not open a bank account in her own name without a husband's signature until 1975. In France, a married woman needed her husband's permission to open a bank account or take a job until 1965. In parts of Spain, similar restrictions lingered well into the later 20th century. These were not ancient customs from some distant era. Many of the women living today were born while these laws were still on the books, or raised by mothers who lived under them. The laws have since changed everywhere in Europe, but laws changing on paper and habits changing in practice are two different timelines, and the second one moves much slower than the first. Even now, researchers studying European credit markets have found that women, particularly single women, are still more likely to be asked for a cosigner, still more likely to be quoted more conservative loan terms, still more likely to be asked, gently but persistently, whether a partner will be involved in a major purchase. Not because any clerk believes it is illegal to serve her alone, because an old assumption, once written into law, has a long half-life in habit. America built its financial system on a different timeline entirely. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, passed in 1974, made it illegal for any lender to require a cosigner from a woman applying a loan, and it landed inside a culture that was already leaning hard into individual credit history as the only currency that mattered. Not marital status, not family name, just a number built from her own borrowing and repaying. 50 years of that system, compounding on itself, has produced something now considered unremarkable in America, and still slightly startling to visitors: single women buying homes in the US at higher rates than single men, according to recent National Association of Realtors data, an outcome almost unheard of in most of Europe. So when a European woman sits across from an American loan officer for the first time, she often arrives braced for a version of the conversation she has had before. The raised eyebrow, the question about a partner, the quiet suggestion that this might go more smoothly with someone else's name attached. It does not come. The paperwork asks about her income, her credit history, her ability to pay, nothing else. She signs one name on the line, and the house, the loan, the credit line belongs to exactly that. Her, alone, fully sufficient on paper in a way she was never quite told she was allowed to be back home. What she is reacting to in that moment is not American generosity. It is the plain fact that a system, quietly built over half a century, decided a woman's word was enough collateral all along. In much of Europe, pregnancy has long been treated as a private matter, handled quietly, inside the family, until the child actually arrives. In France, there is even a lingering superstition, still observed by many older generations, against buying anything for a baby before it is born. No cradle, no clothes, no gifts, out of an old fear of inviting bad luck by celebrating too early. In Germany and much of Scandinavia, baby showers exist, but remain a fairly recent, modest import, often just a small gathering of close friends, rather than a communal event. The dominant cultural instinct across large parts of the continent has been the same for generations. Pregnancy is not a public celebration. It is a private passage, and you keep the fuss to a minimum until the baby is safely here. America built a different instinct, and it did not happen by accident. The baby shower itself, in its modern form, took root in the United States in the 1950s at exactly the moment American suburban culture was organizing itself around neighborhood, networks, church groups, and workplace communities that actively showed up for each other's major life events. Sociologists who study American social rituals describe this as a form of anticipatory community, the idea that a woman does not have to wait until the baby arrives to be surrounded and supported. The community mobilizes in advance before there is even a guarantee of a safe delivery, as an act of collective faith rather than caution. That instinct never went away. It expanded. Modern American workplaces hold shower parties in conference rooms. Neighbors who have exchanged only a few words leave casserole dishes on porches in the final weeks before a due date. Online communities organize meal trains for coworkers they have met only a handful of times, coordinating who brings dinner on which night for the first month after the baby comes home. None of this is treated as extraordinary. It is treated as simply what you do. So when a European woman becomes visibly pregnant in America for the first time, she often notices the shift before she understands it. A stranger in a grocery store asks when she's due, then offers to carry her bags. Coworkers she barely knows organize a shower complete with games and a diaper cake, an entire genre of celebration she had never seen back home. A neighbor she has met twice starts leaving meals on her doorstep the week the baby arrives, without being asked, without expecting anything back. She keeps waiting for the catch. There isn't one. What she is encountering is not simply kindness. It is a country that decided, generations ago, that a pregnant woman should never have to carry the weight of a new life entirely on her own, and built an entire culture of casseroles, showers, and meal trains to make sure of it, long before she ever had to ask. In much of continental Europe, starting a business is not simply a matter of deciding to start one. In Germany, registering a GmbH, the standard small business structure, requires a minimum capital deposit, a notarized founding document, and a trip to a notary's office before a single sale is ever made, a process that commonly takes several weeks. In France, opening a business has historically meant navigating layers of registration through multiple government bodies, a process that improved with reforms but still runs on the assumption that starting a company is a formal, supervised undertaking, not a spontaneous one. None of this is corruption or inefficiency for its own sake. It reflects a deeper cultural instinct. Business formation is treated as something the state should oversee closely at every step before it lets you begin. America inherited the opposite instinct, and it traces back to something older than any modern policy. From the earliest days of westward expansion, American law leaned toward making it easy for an individual to stake a claim and start something, then let the market sort out whether it worked. That instinct calcified into the modern LLC, a business structure. Most U.S. states allow a person to file online, alone, without a notary, without a minimum deposit, often approved within a single business day. In several states, a woman can register her company before lunch and have a business bank account open before dinner. The effect of that speed shows up in the numbers. According to recent data from the National Association of Women Business Owners, women now start new businesses in the United States at a faster rate than men, and women-owned businesses account for a rapidly growing share of new companies formed each year. That is not simply a story about ambition. It is a story about a system that removed nearly every structural obstacle standing between the idea and the first sale. So when a European woman decides, almost on impulse, to turn a hobby into a small American business, a candle line, a bakery, a consulting practice, she often expects the process to swallow months, the way it would have back home. Instead, she fills out a form online, pays a modest fee, and receives confirmation before the coffee she made that morning has gone cold. No notary, no board of approval, no one asking if she is qualified enough, financed enough, or certain enough to try. What surprises her is not that it's possible. It's that nobody along the way asked her to prove she deserved the chance before giving it to her. In America, the paperwork does not ask whether you'll succeed. It only asks whether you're ready to begin. In many parts of Europe, divorce carries a weight that outlasts the legal paperwork by decades. Italy did not fully legalize divorce until 1970, and even after the law changed, it required years of separation before a divorce could be finalized. A deliberate design meant to make leaving a marriage as slow and difficult as the culture believed it should be. Ireland did not legalize divorce until 1995, and only then by the narrowest possible margin in a national referendum. In smaller towns across southern and eastern Europe, sociologists studying rural communities have documented a lingering pattern. A divorced woman is still quietly discussed differently than a divorced man, her reasons scrutinized in a way his rarely are, her chances at a respectable second marriage treated as diminished, no matter the circumstances that ended the first one. America's relationship with divorce followed an entirely different legal and cultural path. California introduced full no-fault divorce in 1969, meaning a marriage could end without either party having to prove wrongdoing, blame, or failure in a courtroom. Within a decade, every U.S. state had adopted some version of the same principle. That single legal shift did something quieter and larger than just simplifying paperwork. It separated the ending of a marriage from the idea of a verdict on the people inside it. A marriage could simply not work, the way a job or a friendship sometimes simply doesn't, without either party being cast as the villain. That legal shift shaped the culture around it. American media, self-help books, and everyday conversation adopted a phrase that barely exists in the same form in most European languages. Starting over, delivered as praise rather than pity. Talk shows built entire episodes around women who rebuilt their lives after divorce. Dating after 40 stopped being treated as a slightly embarrassing subplot and became its own accepted chapter, openly discussed at dinner tables and in Sunday sermons alike. So, when a European woman arrives in America carrying a divorce she has spent years quietly managing the story around, she often braces for a familiar reaction, the sympathetic tilt of the head, the unspoken question about what went wrong on her end. It rarely comes. New acquaintances ask about her life now, not her marriage then. A downstairs neighbor, hearing she is recently divorced, responds with something closer to congratulations on the fresh start than condolences for the loss. Dating again in her 40s is met with encouragement, not raised eyebrows. What she is witnessing is not indifference to marriage. It is a culture that decided 50 years ago that a woman's worth should never be measured by whether one chapter of her life ended the way she once expected it to. In much of Europe, the moment a woman announces she is pregnant at work often triggers something no policy officially sanctions, but almost everyone quietly understands: a mental recalculation of what she is still capable of. In Germany, the word Rabenmutter, literally raven mother, still surfaces in ordinary conversation, used without much self-awareness to describe a mother who returns to work too soon or relies too heavily on daycare, as though a raven, a bird known for leaving its young, were the natural symbol of a woman choosing career over motherhood. Researchers studying German and Austrian workplaces have found something striking hiding behind generous parental leave laws that look progressive on paper. Mothers who return full-time after leave are promoted at noticeably lower rates than mothers who scale back to part-time, and lower still than the men sitting beside them. Sociologists have a name for the pattern: the motherhood penalty, the almost automatic assumption that ambition and motherhood must trade off against each other, that a woman cannot fully want both without giving something up. It is not confined to Germany. Studies across the Netherlands, Austria, and parts of Southern Europe describe the same quiet mechanism operating under different names. A woman returns from leave to find her biggest client has been temporarily reassigned. A department restructures itself while she was out, and her old responsibilities simply migrate to someone else's desk. No one frames it as punishment. It gets framed as consideration, a kinder workload, a gentler transition, offered without being asked for, and rarely offered to the fathers in the same office. America built its work culture around a very different pressure, one that had almost nothing to do with fairness and almost everything to do with necessity. The United States remains the only wealthy country in the world with no federal law guaranteeing paid parental leave. For decades, that absence forced a blunt trade-off on American mothers. Take unpaid time and hope the job survives it, or come back fast and prove nothing had changed. Out of that harsh math, an unplanned byproduct emerged. American companies, especially over the last 2 decades, drifted toward evaluating employees by output rather than hours logged at a desk. Not as a gift to parents, but because a leaner, faster-moving economy had less patience for measuring anything else. A system built to reward results rather than presence turned out to have no built-in mechanism left for quietly punishing someone for leaving early to pick up a sick child, then finishing the deck from her kitchen table at 9 that night. The numbers reflect exactly that shift. Pew Research has tracked mothers serving as the primary or sole breadwinner in a steadily rising share of American households for more than 3 decades now. A climb that continued through recessions, through a pandemic that forced millions of women out of offices and back in again, without triggering the same cultural anxiety that still surrounds similar numbers in parts of Europe. In American companies, when a mother returns from leave and the work keeps getting done, the promotions tend to follow the results, not the calendar. So, when a European woman takes a leadership role at an American company after having children, she often finds herself waiting for a specific moment, the one she has learned to expect. The meeting rescheduled without her, the project quietly handed to someone with more bandwidth, the promotion that goes, gently and without explanation, to the colleague without kids. She waits through her first review, then her second. It never comes. Her chair stays exactly where it was before she left. Same seat, same table, same standing in the room, because as far as anyone there is concerned, nothing about her changed. Except now, there's a photo of her children taped to the edge of her monitor. What she eventually understands is that no one had to fight to get that chair back for her. It was never moved in the first place, not because the company made some grand, public commitment to motherhood, but because a culture built around counting output instead of hours had, almost without meaning to, run out of reasons to hold anything against her at all. By the time all 5 stories settle, a pattern starts to surface that none of these women set out looking for. It was never really about the money or the paperwork or even the promotions. It was about the quiet absence of a second signature, the co-signer that was never asked for, the explanation that was never required, the permission that simply wasn't part of the process to begin with. Back home, so much of what shaped their lives had been decided long before they were born. In a bank's lending policy from the 1960s, in a divorce law that took decades to pass, in an old word for mother that still carried judgment folded into its syllables. None of it announced itself as a rule. It simply sat in the background, the way old architecture does, shaping what felt possible without anyone having to say so out loud. And then they stood in a country that had, mostly by accident and sometimes by design, torn a lot of that architecture down half a century ago and never quite rebuilt it. What they found waiting on the other side wasn't celebration, it was something closer to indifference. A system that simply stopped checking whether a woman deserved the chance before handing it to her. Maybe that is the real difference between the 2 continents. The one no single fact fully captures on its own. Not that one place is kinder than the other, but that one of them, at some point, decided a woman's word was enough collateral all along, and then quietly built an entire country around never asking her to prove it twice.